Okay, now I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker. And this is a gentleman, as I mentioned, was back here in 2010. We consider him a friend of the ECC. He's a world authority on competitiveness. He's pioneered the research in this field for over 25 years. He's a professor at IMD in Lausanne. He founded the World Competitiveness Center, also at Lausanne. He's the chairman of the board of directors of Le Temps, the leading French language Swiss newspaper. He's a former chairman of the board of the Sandoz Financial and Banking Holding, and he's a member of the board of the Banque Edouard Constant. He's a former managing director of the World Economic Forum and of the Davos Symposium for many, many years. Stephane is also a member of a number of institutes, such as the China Enterprise Management Association, Swiss Academy of Engineering Sciences, Mexican Council for Competitiveness, the Thai Management Association, and he's a previous member of the Constitutional Assembly of his local state in Switzerland, and he's obviously a very pronounced author of many publications, and he's got a tremendous number of publications on competitiveness and global business economics. He has a best-selling book that I'd recommend you to take a look at. It's called Top Class Competitors: How Nations, Firms, and Individuals Succeed in the New World of Competitiveness with Wiley. Please help me welcome Stephane Garelli.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much indeed for this very kind introduction. I think after all that, you must be dead scared. It's a great pleasure. It's a great honor to have been invited back here to address this audience. A great honor indeed, but also you have to know something. The worst thing that can happen for an economist is when somebody in the audience stand up and say, "Hey, Prof, I remember very well what you said the last time." So I hope you have forgotten everything I said 4 years ago, and we can start with a clean plate again. I'm going to say a few words about the world economy, where we stand, what's happening, because actually this is having a huge impact on the way we make our business. Clausewitz said one day strategy is the evolution of a central idea through continually changing circumstances. And I'm going to deal with these continually changing circumstances which are making our life so difficult and which are changing everything we are doing today. The real thing is that the tool we have to assess all that is not very easy. And I think once John Kenneth Galbraith, you remember, was an advisor to President Kennedy, said the following. He said, "Economics is the only field in which two people can receive the Nobel Prize for saying exactly the opposite thing." And I think this is precisely the problem we have. We have opinions. Having the truth is more difficult. So let's see the world economy today. Is it really getting better? We get good news, bad news, good news, bad news. Where do you stand? When you read the press, it's a bit disquieting. You get this little cartoon, "Relax. My broker says the economy will bounce back. Answer, but I am your broker." So we are in this situation where we are not quite sure in which direction it's going. We are starting to have the GDP numbers now for the second quarter. As you can see, this is Europe, 0.7%. It's not very good. Most of the countries are on the right side, but still some are in recession, like Italy, Denmark. Not very good news. If you are looking at Latin America, here we have some very different numbers. Brazil is really disappointing, minus 0.9%. Chile is so-so. Venezuela, 1%. Argentina, minus 0.2%. You can relax, the numbers are wrong in any case. So basically, we are in this situation where the world economy is in a very slow state. Look at Russia, 0.8%, India, 5.7%, South Africa. This is Asia. China, 7.5%, that's not too bad. The rest is slowing down a little bit. Japan, disquieting, minus 0.1%. United States of America, you are 2.5%. 12 months period of time, Q2. Let's see quarter over quarter to see in which direction the economy is going. China is still okay. We have good numbers. Well, actually, the United Kingdom, look, plus 3.4%. Very good news. This is a result of the royal baby. It gives a boost to the economy. Germany slowing down again, and of course the United States, very good quarter because, as you know, Q1 was very bad because of the very cold winter. The real question on your radar screen is, can you trust those numbers? You know, can you trust national accounts? You take Nigeria at the end, they have increased their GDP by 50% in March, you know, just recalculation. Europe will increase because in September they are going to consider that R&D is going to be an investment and not an expense, which is good news. The United Kingdom is increasing in July, its GDP grows because now they are including in their calculation drug trafficking and prostitution. As you can see, you never can be too innovative in statistics. So that's where we are now, so you know, take those things with a certain distance. The world economy is still global, no doubt, but I think you have about everything. It's totally desynchronized. Some countries in inflation, some countries deflation, some countries in recession, some countries growing pretty well. The name of the game is obviously resilience, adaptability, but one global model does not fit every country anymore, and we will have to adapt that. So in this situation, the name of the game is, you know, what are the new rules of the game? What is the so-called new normal? And let's start with the advanced economy, how we would define it. I think that until 2008, basically the name of the game, that the economy was growing, and from time to time we had a recession, 6 months, 18 months, and then after we were growing again. It's a little bit like if you are riding a bicycle full speed, you fall on the ground, you take the dust away, and you go back on the bicycle and you run full speed. Now, after 2008, the situation has changed dramatically. Now you take the same line and you reverse it. We may have a period of soft growth interrupted by a period of stronger growth. Completely the reverse and the opposite. If I would have to illustrate that, I would say it's a little bit like if you are riding a donkey. If you ride a donkey, it goes slowly, you don't know why. Then suddenly it starts running, you don't know why. And then it goes back going slowly, and you don't know why either. That's exactly how is the economy today. We are riding a donkey, and it's not very easy. Why did it happen? Actually, let's try to see why we have this situation. If you are looking at globalization altogether, globalization is nothing else than about $3,000 billion of investment that left the US and Europe and went to the rest of the world. And actually, the name of the game is, after that, where did it go? Part of the money was reinvested in local markets. Part of the money was redistributed in global companies. And on this chart, you have the two main issues of today. Number one, deindustrialization, and number two, taxation. So let's look at those as a consequence of globalization. The first thing is that we have gone into a lot of offshoring and outsourcing. If you are looking at the US, the UK, and Japan, over the past 20 years, they have lost basically 20% of their industry, which is really quite extraordinary. Why this was the case, this deindustrialization, obviously outsourcing, very well illustrated by this little guy who is telling his mother, you know, good news, I got top grades. And he added, I outsources my homework to a kid overseas. And you know, those kids, they are doing it. Is reshoring the answer? You know, there is a big debate here in the US saying that reshoring could produce 3 million jobs in this country, no doubt. You know also that General Electric has been very much, Jeff Immelt, very much on the forefront of that. They have done in Louisville, Kentucky, the household appliances division coming back from China. Actually, what we are seeing today, that reshoring is creating a lot of jobs in robotics. It means that the jobs coming back are mainly robots and engineers and not the blue-collar jobs that left when the jobs went away. So yes, it's coming back, but a lot of automation will also be there. The second big issue by government is to say, if we are losing the business, let's make sure we don't lose the money. And the issue is taxation. And I think that a lot of innovation here, again, is coming. We have people saying, you know, we need to have financial transaction tax, FTT, the so-called Tobin tax, 0.1% on shares, 0.01% on derivatives. We need more transparency, you know, addressing tax deduction, tax havens. But the very big issue, which is going to affect all of you in this room, is going to be the taxation of multinational companies. Who pays what and where is going to be the key issue for the next few years. And if you are looking at the situation, everybody is sitting on a mountain of liquidity, no doubt about that. Here in the US, this is at the end of Q2, more than $2,000 billion in liquidity, cash and cash equivalent, $2,480 billion in Europe, $7,000 billion. This is an estimate of the 1,000 global companies, how much cash they have. Now, what is interesting in this, and you know, of course, the number one company in terms of cash is Apple, $148 billion, 88% of it is abroad. And of course, is not coming back into the US because of the tax situation. And some estimates which were done there, which are quite interesting, is the evolution of profits by US companies. And as you can see above, a lot above now, 42% of the profits abroad are declared in Bermuda, Ireland, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and very small in my country, Switzerland, and Australia, Canada, and the rest is going down. So you can imagine that the governments are reacting to that, and they try also to find out also how the money is going to be used. And this is the next issue. Tons of liquidity, what do you make of it? And I think a lot of companies are giving dividends, so far so good, buying share buyback. And of course, you have M&A, mergers and acquisition, and that's why we have never seen so many M&A now, because of the mountain of liquidity, sometimes abroad, which people have to use. By the way, keep in mind, M&A stands also for murder and assassination, which is often what we are seeing there. So what is really happening? It is that actually one of the key issues that you have a lot of money around, the interest rates are going down because the central banks are pouring money on the market. Some goes to large companies, some of the money goes back to the government, stock exchange, goes back to the banks, but who doesn't get the cheap money? The small entrepreneurs. And as long as we don't succeed to make sure that the smaller entrepreneurs get the money into the company, then I think we will have a lot of problems for the economy to bounce back in certain countries. The second issue about banks is that banks are moving from a situation of being lenders of money to being borrowers of money. If I take Europe, if I take globally, this is where we are at the capital shortfall, which means how much money the banks have to borrow to be in line with the new capital requirement today, between $250 and $300 billion this year, which means they are pumping money out of the market instead of putting the money back on the market. And this is well illustrated by this little cartoon, where you have the little guy is going to the bank, and he's telling the banker manager, I'm here to ask you for a loan. Answer, that's funny, me too. And that's where we are today in this situation where people feel that actually the money is not going where it should go. And then you have on the top of this regulation and complexity as one of the very big issues. If you take the Basel III agreement, this is now 616 pages of exciting financial ratios. You never survive that. I have to say that in the United States of America, you have done better. The Dodd-Frank Act is 848 pages. Yeah, this is a bit difficult. You take the rules of application, 60,000 pages for Basel III, 30,000 pages for the Dodd-Frank Act. Who can survive that? The only good news was found by McKinsey, where they estimate that this will create 70,000 full-time jobs just in Europe alone. So as you can see, we have a tendency to create jobs where they should not be. And therefore, on your radar screen, there should be absolutely the fact that compliance is going to become a nightmare. We are going to be really full of laws, regulation, to make our life very, very difficult. And actually, we experience it every day. I think all of you here, you are downloading a program on internet, and whenever you want to download a program on internet, appears this screen, terms and conditions, right? Terms and conditions. Do you read it? No. You just push accept. And you are right not to read it, because if you would read it, you would spend 250 hours per year reading this nonsense. At the end of the day, by giving too much information, we are really going the opposite direction. And as it was very well summarized by President Harry Truman, who said one day, if you cannot convince them, then confuse them, which I think is a great strategy today. And then the question becomes rapidly, are government responsible of this mess? And if you are looking at the news I said just before, you could say, yes, this is improving, the UK is getting better, Japan is okay, Spain is getting better. But when you are looking at the long-term issues like budget deficit, they are still there. And they are going to be there for quite some time, minus 7.8% in Japan. It's not going to disappear overnight. And I think this kind of situation is getting now deep in the mind of people. I was recently in Germany, in Berlin, and taking the car from the airport to the hotel. I go in front of a travel agency. In front of the travel agency was written in big, for the Germans, for the holiday, go to Greece. And underneath was written, and visit your taxes. So people start to feel a little bit upset by the situation, especially when the summer comes. And then you get the system about debt. Everybody is speaking about debt, but we are all speaking about central government debt. But you have now what we call the next trick is sub-sovereign debt. You know, take California, $375 billion of debt. Take Detroit, $17 billion in liability. You know about that. What is fantastic about California is that we are all speaking about the success stories like Amazon, Facebook, Google, etc. They are born in California, but the state is bankrupt. There's something wrong. And the same is happening actually in Europe. Rome almost closed down 4 months ago. Catalonia, Valencia, and Madrid are swimming into debt. And Catalonia wants to become independent. That will help. Half of the German states are swimming into debt. So one level down, you have this problem that is going to last. And I didn't speak about Scotland, of course. So our government responsible, there is a quote I like very much by President Reagan, who said one day the following. He said, actually, governments do not solve problems. And yet, they subsidize them. And I think this is a very good statement, because this is what's happening. They never disappear, those problems. And then you have the problem of the time bomb, the consequence of this situation. Of course, we are all aware about the unemployment issue. You are at 6.3% in the US. You are doing a lot better than other countries. I think the key issue is about youth unemployment. Those kids between the age of 16 years old, 24 years old, these are the numbers we have. You know that in the US, 15%, 23% in Europe, but look at Spain. 53% of those kids have no job. It's not anymore an issue of economics, it's social, it's very soon political. How do we deal with this? And there is something interesting here, is that if you are looking at the ranking about the best education system in the Western Hemisphere, most of the time, number one is Finland. And still Finland has 19% of those kids without job, and the question is why? As an explanation, let's go back. Oscar Wilde, who said one day the following, you can never be overdressed or overeducated. Very good statement, characterized by the fact that it is totally wrong. You can be overdressed, see yourself and your children. Let's see overeducated. OECD, secondary school to college, 56% of the population. But if you are looking at Korea and Finland, 90%. They all leave secondary school, they all go to the university, which means that nobody can be a plumber anymore, nobody is a carpenter, and when you go in the street, this is what you see. Overeducation, this is a cartoon of 1902, huh? Everybody overeducated. In the US and Europe, 40 to 45% of these young guys are underemployed. And I think it means something important, and in your industry, you are at the core of it. We should be able to have two types of education: apprenticeship, you learn a job, and university, you learn a trend or science. You need both of them, otherwise you have a problem. Otherwise you have this situation, this little kid who is telling its teacher, actually, can I go home before I get overeducated? Apprenticeship and, of course, university education are important. This is what I reply here, is if you have both things taking place together, you reduce unemployment of the young population. All those countries with low unemployment of the youth, they have apprenticeship, very important for the future. Then the question is, if this is slowing down, is this because consumers are changing? And I think they are. If you are looking on the path of prosperity in the emerging economy, you are in what I call a first buy economy. A first buy economy, my first phone, my first TV, actually I need it, give me money and I buy it immediately. But in the US, in Europe, we are in a different type of economy. We are in a replacement economy. I buy a phone, I already have one. I buy a car, I already have one. I buy a sofa, I already have one. Actually, you are in an economy of I want it. Your next cellular phone, you don't need it, but you may want it. And that's a major difference in the way we are going to buy. Let me illustrate that. Take your home and ask yourself the following question. How many products is there in a typical home? If you don't know the answer, when the weekend comes, I propose the following. Call your family and say, hey, I have a project for the weekend. We are going to make a full inventory of everything we have at home. And you will become immensely popular. Second question, how many more can you bring in? And the answer is, difficult. Let me show you. This is where I live in Switzerland. I live on the Lake of Geneva in a small city called Roll. I'm not in the castle, I'm just next door. And in my little city, we have a new cultural center, which is called the recycling dump. That's where we meet the weekend, we exchange big ideas while we recycle, and then we discovered something very interesting. Actually, a lot of the products which are brought there are not broken. They are simply not wanted. They are in full shape. They do function very well, and we had to change from recycling to exchange of product because the people don't want them, but the products are in very good shape. And this is a good illustration of what's happening today, an illustration which was very well given by Steve Jobs in the past. You remember when the iPad came? Nobody in his right mind needed an iPad. But then Steve Jobs came and he said, relax, with the iPad, it will simplify all the tasks you never had to do before. And that's precisely the problem of today. And George Bernard Shaw says, yes, there is a shift, there is no doubt. He says, our necessities are few, but our wants are endless. And we are now going to focus on the wants, on what people really are after. And if I would summarize the paradigms about consumption, I would say that in the year 2000, the name of the game was shop until you drop. You remember? Shop until you drop. Well, ladies and gentlemen, congratulations, it's done. At least we have achieved something. So what's happening with the other side of the world, with the emerging economies? Well, they are still okay. They were cruising, doing very well, like in a highway. Now it's a bit more like a mountain road, a bit more slippery, higher cost, social expectation. A lot of things are changing, but they are still going up, still doing fine. But what is the priority of the new money? Number one, purchase of assets. With a huge money, people are going to buy companies abroad. We see that a lot of happening. These are some examples of China during the past year. Some full acquisition, some part acquisition or participation. As you can see, they start to buy a lot, also outside Africa. I think that the very big revolution is elsewhere. We have not created only markets abroad, we have created companies abroad. We estimated now that we have about 1,000 firms in the emerging markets with a revenue above $1 billion, which can be qualified as global company. We have an explosion of new brands now on the market, names that we didn't know 10 years ago, names which are young, and some of those names like Haier in the middle in China. 2 years ago, Haier became the largest household appliance company in the world. Never heard about them 10 years ago, here they are. Same thing happening in the banking sector. We have a lot of new names. Who are they? Do we know them? Can we partner with them? Can we sell to them? There is a whole discovery system to take place. And this is going extremely fast. The Fortune global ranking was just produced about last week. And if you are looking at this ranking, 128 companies are coming from the US, 57 Japan, etc. But if you are looking at the emerging economy, look, 95 now are coming from China. Do we know them? I know perhaps 10%, 20%, but no more. And this discovery of these new players on the market is going to be something fundamental for the future. We'll have an impact also on currencies. Today, as you know it very well in your business, the dollar is the currency. 46% of the world transactions are in dollars. But if you are looking at who has the biggest reserves in currencies, well, China, with the second largest trading nation in the world, China, and the yuan is only 2.3% of transactions. So sooner or later, the yuan is going to increase and is going to be a currency to be with us. Some source of concern very rapidly. The first one is inflation. There are a lot of countries in the world where you operate where inflation is out of control. Of course, Argentina and Venezuela, but you have Indonesia, you have India, you have Turkey. And this is interesting. You know, in the advanced economy, we are concerned about deflation. Here, it's inflation. But the real key issue you have to keep on check is what we call shadow banking. Those institutions lending money which are not a bank and not regulated as a bank, and this is a market of $76,000 billion. It's a time bomb in making. At any moment, it can just burst and be a lot of problem for the future. Shadow banking, which happened also in England and elsewhere, is really the next big thing on the market. Right, let's see a little bit further. Are you still alive? Good. The emerging economy is the other big revolution now. Let's look at the market size, and I want to project you in a generation from now to show you where are the markets and what's the size of the market. Source, the United Nations. But to show you that a generation from now is tomorrow, I want to take you back a generation ago. This is how it looked like a generation ago. Do you know who it is? Probably not. This is President François Hollande from France. Interesting, I better get used to him. This is how she looked like a generation ago. Do you know who she is? That's correct, Chancellor Angela Merkel from Germany. Nice, huh? I don't do this joke in Germany. This is how we look like a generation ago. Cameron of the United Kingdom. The next one are more difficult. This is how they look like a generation ago. Yes. This is how we look like a generation ago. Ladies and gentlemen, when you are looking at these pictures, tell yourself, in life, everything is possible. Now, if they could make it, we can make it. These are the charts about the population of the world. This is where we are now in millions of people. 2050, North America plus 100 million people, markets. Latin America plus 160 million. Europe flat, doesn't move too much. Africa, fasten your seatbelt, doubling in size, 2050, huh? And Asia plus 1 billion. Within those numbers, you have another revolution which is extraordinary, which is a revolution about poverty. 1981, 52% of the world population earning $2 a day. Today, we are at 21%. Where did the reduction occur? Especially in China and Asia, a bit less in Africa. But what it means is the following. You escape poverty at $2 a day, and you are middle class in the emerging economy at $10 a day. The question is what's happening in between? And in between, you have 2.8 billion people who are joining now the world economy, and the question is, what can we sell to these people? And this is why you have an enormous impact in terms of innovation. People who say, what kind of products? Ideal Lab is making houses for $1,500. Tata is making a swash purifier of water, $16, works 6 months without a battery, and it is so successful that Unilever and Nestle are going into this market. Mozilla is making now a phone at $25. M-Pesa, mobile money, was not invented in the US or Europe, but was invented in Kenya, M-Pesa. And now in Kenya, 54% of the GDP transactions are made through mobile money. And the question is, can this be re-exported elsewhere, the same model? Of course, the answer is yes, although it was really forced by the environment. Look at Africa now. I have taken some countries, and this is the number of people, the percentage of the population with a bank account. Everybody is under 50%. This is the percentage of the population with a mobile phone subscription, and everybody is above 50%. Therefore, you use your phone as a means of payment, and you see if it can work elsewhere. And if you are looking at Africa by itself, this is the old map of Africa. This is the map of Africa we all know. But I discovered a new one, another map of Africa. And inside the continent, you can fit the US, China, India, Europe, the United Kingdom. The size of this continent is gigantic, and you still have 100 companies with a revenue above $1 billion. Do we know them? Probably not. And I think this is a challenge for the future. So let me speak about some heavyweights which are going to really focus, which are really going to underlie the economy during the next few months. The first one, and you are at the heart of this revolution, is the energy renaissance in the US. I will not say too much about it because you know the numbers. This was the original production. This is the one which is now foreseen in oil. And what we have, this is, but you know it, the International Energy Agency in 2015, you are going to produce as much gas as Russia. This is going to be a major revolution. And in 2020, the US is going to produce as much oil as Saudi Arabia, 11 million barrels a day. Fantastic revolution, but the real impact of it for the rest of the world is that in 2020, the price of energy, the price of electricity in the US will be half the price of electricity in Europe, which means a formidable competitive advantage for American companies worldwide, and where the impact is going only to be felt very soon in the rest of the world. I took Europe, same story for Japan. What strikes me in this is not so much the fact that there is shale gas or not. Actually, everybody has shale gas and shale oil. If you are looking at Europe, the place where you have the biggest reserve of shale oil and shale gas is France. But the question is not so much, second place is Poland. The question is not so much, do you have it? The question is, do you want it? And if you go to our French friends and you tell them, good news, you have oil in the region of Paris, they come back and they say, fine, what do we do with Paris? And you say, relax. In Paris, you have already the Eiffel Tower, which you can use as a drilling platform. So part of the infrastructure is already paid. You just have to know what you do with the people. Second thing, urbanization is going to be an enormous impact on the future. If you are looking at the world population, 2030, 60% of the world population will be living in cities. Consumption of energy will be huge. Actually, we have now what we call mega regions, agglomeration of cities together. Take the Pearl River Delta, Macau, Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou. 120 million people are living there. This is huge. This is enormous. If you are looking in China today, already 72 skyscrapers in China above 250 meters. This is just extraordinary what's happening in cities. The other big revolution we know less is a revolution on land, land acquisition. Today we have about, during the past 10 years, 28 million hectares of land were acquired by advanced economy in the rest of the world. Half of this land acquisition took place in Africa. This is a quiet revolution, especially on food, which most people don't know about it. Huge impact on the world economy for the future. Climate change is also a big issue. I'm always told, well, you didn't speak about climate change. I say, fine, I'm going to speak about climate change. But I didn't know what to say, frankly speaking. But I discovered something very interesting. I discovered the oldest statistic available in the world, and this is it. It is when the cherry blossoms, when the cherry are blossoming in Kyoto in a special garden. Well, since 1815, there is a little guy who is keeping notes of that. And this is where we are, 15th of April, 20th of April. This is where we are, 2001, 29. 1st of April, 9th of April, something is happening. And this is what happened to this year, 6th of April. So something is happening. Now I've spoke about climate change. And finally, aging and wellness. You know, the Max Planck Institute in Germany found the following thing. They said, you know, actually, if you are looking at life expectation between the caveman or the cave woman, 20,000 before Christ and 1800, it has not changed. It has stayed 30 to 35 years. Nothing stable. However, during the past 200 years, life expectancy has exploded, and now it's more than 85 years for most of us here. It is extraordinary. And what it means is the following for all of us in this room. The most extraordinary statistic is life expectancy has been increasing 5 hours per day. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 hours per day means the following. At the end of my presentation, your life expectation will have been increased by 9 minutes. If you want, I can speak longer. But I think Tara, she would not like it. Okay, let me conclude. I think that actually we compete not only with resource and everything, we compete with mindset. And the mindset is really the key issue for the future. President Thomas Jefferson one day said the following. He said, actually, nothing can stop the one with the right mental attitude. So right. And then he added behind, and nothing can help the one with the wrong mental attitude. So true. And I think we have to keep in mind the impact of the mindset, not only on companies, but also on nations. This is Nanjing Road in Shanghai. Some of you have recognized it. They went in China and they asked the Chinese friends, what are the keywords which reflect best your value system? Answer of the people, 68% said work hard and get rich. 68% in a poll conducted by Gallup, work hard and get rich. Very fine. Ladies and gentlemen, since the weekend is approaching, I propose the following. When you are back home, call your children and tell them, come here. I have to speak to you. I have heard at this conference that the name of the game is China is work hard and get rich. My son, my daughter, do you recognize yourself in this value system? And you know what they will say? They will say, actually, Mom, Dad, you can happily forget the first part of the sentence, which is totally useless, and concentrate immediately on the essential. Get rich. And we have an entire generation today of people who have a quick money mentality. You know, at the university, I have my students, they come to me and they say, well, Prof, if we are not a billionaire at the age of 25, we are a failure. I say, come on, maybe not. But they have, you know, this Facebook approach, work hard, get rich. Immediately, let's not work too hard, let's get rich. But then there is something even more interesting. You have the younger generation, the smaller one, and you go back and you say, China, work hard, get rich. And then you say, your older brother and sister says, I don't want to work hard, I want just to get rich. What about you? And the younger generation, they will look in your eyes and will say, well, actually, I don't even want to get rich. And you will say, what? My son, my daughter? You don't want to work hard, you don't want to get rich, you don't want to build your own house? And they will look at you and will say, but Mom, Dad, why do you want me to work hard like an idiot to build my own house while you have already done it? All I have to do is just to wait. So we have an entire generation of wait and see. Now, I have to be honest. I had this discussion with my son because he came and he said, Dad, if I understand well, I just have to wait. I say, hold it. There is another part of the theory which is the following. I intend to live longer, which means the money will go above you and will go to your children. And I have to tell you that since we have had this discussion at home, the atmosphere is much more tense than it used to be. But that's a new generation. You have to accept uncertainties. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Henri-Frédéric Amiel. Amiel is a Swiss philosopher. We have one. Here he is. Oh, by the way, you know he's Swiss because he has a watch. You have seen the watch? He's Swiss. And he used to say the following: the one who insists on perfect clearness before he decides actually never decides. And I think this is so true. When I was younger, I worked a little bit with Bill Hewlett, the founder of Hewlett-Packard, and he always used to tell us, you want to be 100% sure, you will be 100% late. There is a moment in life, just do it and see what happens. Manage your image. You know that in your sectors. The old media is not easy, but the new media is a nightmare. This is anonymous. You don't know who is on the other side. You don't know who has written the Twitter or the rest, but it's still very important. And it forces us to adjust to a society where transparency is the name of the game. Look at Mark Twain, what he said in this respect. He says, you know, never do wrong. And he added, especially when somebody is looking. And today, everybody is looking. And the transparency forces some changes. But still, keep in mind, there are still some good things with the social network. This is a young guy who's going in for a HR manager interview, and the HR manager is telling the young guy, do you have any leadership experience? Answer, yes, I have 6 people following me on Twitter. Today, everybody can be a leader. There is a time for innovation, but actually 95% of competitiveness is nothing else than excellence in implementation. This is the name of the game. I give you an illustration. The next time you take your flight back home and you sit down in the plane, tell yourself, in this plane, the last thing I want to have is an innovative pilot. Somebody who tells you, hey, I have a new plane. Let me show you what I can do with it. No. So there are plenty of things in life where you don't want to see innovation. And to conclude, the following, I think one of the best quotes I know by Albert Einstein is number one, the following. He says, one day logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. I think it is a very profound statement, because if you are only logical, you will reproduce the past. If you have imagination, you will reinvent the future. We need people with a lot of imagination, and not only people who are going to be logical. This is the name of the game. Because in this kind of situation, keep in mind the impossible might be possible, as you can see with this Chinese acrobat. And there is a Chinese proverb I like very much in this respect, which is the following. The person who says it cannot be done should not interrupt the person doing it. And how many times this happened to us in life where people say it's impossible, and they say, but listen, I'm doing it. So let me recap. As a conclusion, I think the key for success are, number one, the management of efficiency, no doubt. Number two, the management of change. It's changing all the time. But I think now we have a new one, which is the management of complexity. The world of today is going to be more complex than ever. Simplifying the world for people and our customer is a huge competitive advantage. And then you need a layer of mindset, a mindset of imagination. You know, Robert Kennedy would used to say you have 2 types of people in life. Those who see a problem as it is and they ask the question why. And those who are looking at possible solutions and they ask the question, why not? I think we need why not people, why not attitude and mentality. I think we need the people with a why not now mindset. High level of energy, let's do it today and not tomorrow. We need people with an attitude of why not me, commitment to the company, why not me? The problem is that in many companies, let's face it, we have people with an attitude of why me? I didn't do anything. So why not me is critical. And then you have to put all that into a solid base of legitimacy, answering the question, why us? And this is probably one of the most important challenges the younger generation is questioning a lot what enterprises are doing. So my last slide as a conclusion of everything. You know, ladies and gentlemen, when you hear about all these issues about modern economics, sometimes you tell yourself, wow, this is so big. How can I make a difference? Well, since I spoke a little bit about Africa, I found an African proverb which tells effectively how we can make a difference. And the African proverb is the following. They say over there, if you think that you are too small to make a difference, and then they add, well, probably you have not spent a night with a mosquito. Ladies and gentlemen, if a mosquito can do it, we should be able to do it. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now you can, excuse me, now you can see why we've invited Professor Stephane Garelli back.
Okay.
Very, very enjoyable. By the way, 9 minutes times 800 people, imagine the impact he's had on all of us. Okay, we have a few minutes for questions and answers, so we've got some mics floating around the room. If you could stand up, identify yourself and the company you work for, and then present your question.
That's better. Sir?
Okay, we got one right over here.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sir.
Bob Handelman from ChemStress. Could you give us an opinion of what you think of these rogue currencies such as Bitcoin and threats of countries from Iran to produce currency to undermine the US dollar, and what the success possibility it is and what impact it could have on us?
Very good. Bitcoins, I don't believe in it personally, unless you are a gambler and you really want to play with it. I think it's when a currency goes $1,000 up and then goes down to $400 within weeks, don't touch it. That would be my advice. I don't think the Bitcoins is going to have a very lasting impact. Regarding the dollar will remain the world currency, no doubt, for some time. I don't think we are going to see immediately the yuan or the rest. What we may see, which a lot of countries are doing, especially in the energy sector, is to try to see if they cannot price in a basket of currency, like the SDR at the IMF, a bit of dollars, a bit of yuan, a bit of euro, etc., and they put all that together. The GCC, I mean, in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries are working on a project like that, and they say, well, it will counterbalance the effect of the dollars going up or down. So I believe much more that the next step will be a basket of currency rather than a currency replacing the dollar. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thanks for the question.
Over there.
Pete Gephardt, Infinity Group, have one question. You talked about deflation.
Yes.
And as you know, right now in Europe, it's much more predominant than it is here.
Yep.
What do you predict in the future what will happen to deflation?
Well, I think for the moment, to give you the numbers, the latest numbers in Europe are 0.4% inflation, 0.4. Actually, it's not deflation in the real terms, but the impact is the same because it's very low inflation. And what I found striking today is a number of countries which have an objective of inflation of 2%. Japan, most of Europe, etc. I think deflation is a nightmare for people for a very simple reason. If people know that the price of a good is going to be cheaper in 6 months than now, they are going to wait 6 months before they buy. Or if they negotiate a contract in a deflationary environment, they are going to say, hey, I want to reduce the price right away. So I think people are very much scared about it. How they are going to combat deflation, I think, in my opinion, in printing more money. I think we are going to see much more liquidity in Europe, which was less than what happened in the QE type of approach in the US. My feeling, the European Central Bank is going to pour more money on the market. This is the only way out for the moment. Thank you, sir.
Very good. Okay, we've got some more questions.
So you're all under the shock, right?
We're coming way back here, Professor.
Yeah, Bill
Yes, sir.
Anderson. I'm with Burns & McDonnell. So we have governments all over the world printing money and adding to their debt. And could you explain to us how that all ends, in your opinion?
That's a very good question. You don't have another one? However, how it's going, well, it could, if they don't know how to get out of it easily, it's going to be a nightmare. You know that the Fed has said that they are reducing, slowly, quietly, the amount of money they are putting on the market every month, but it does not mean that you don't have a ton of money, of liquidity available on the market. Some people, like Professor Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize, etc., believe we are going to go into a very difficult period of time because, he says, and everybody probably would agree, actually the price of capital today is much too low than what it should be. People have the impression that you can borrow money at almost 0% and that capital is virtually free on the market. I think this is the most dangerous impact. I think that the biggest danger, coming on the question we have had before, if people print more money, is that down the road we will go into an inflationary environment, and maybe the worst of it would be stagflation, soft growth, inflation. Some of you in this room may remember what happened in the 70s, 73, 74, etc. This is what we have had. I think this is a risk.
Okay, we still have a few more minutes. No, we're on our way to find a microphone here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good morning. My name is Vikas Moharir. I'm with Wood Group Mustang.
Yes?
One of the issues we've discussed is the resource limitations here, and the outsourcing you talked about has been driven by labor cost arbitrage.
Yeah.
India, China, Latin America, and US. So what is your perspective on that labor cost arbitrage? Is it going to continue there, or is it going to reduce?
I think it's going to be reduced. Keep in mind, India, China, the labor costs are increasing between 20 and 25% a year. So this is the first thing, and some of these places are becoming very expensive by all standards. That's why the hottest country today is Myanmar. Everybody wants to go to Myanmar because this is where you still have the very low cost, Laos and all those things. The Chinese are perfectly aware of that, and they try to move up the value chain because just low labor costs is not the issue. We will have higher labor costs, more regulation on it, no doubt. So my feeling, we are going to see two trends. Number one, a lot of reshoring, bringing the business back home, but this reshoring will be grounded on a lot of technology, as I mentioned. Automation of factories, robotics. We have an explosion of robots today around the world. And I think people are saying, okay, we bring the business back from China and elsewhere, but if we go here back in the US, it will be automated. That's the first consequence. The second consequence is the one I mentioned in my presentation. I believe we are going to see a lot of emerging companies from the emerging market going up the value chain very quickly, saying I cannot continue to be just a low-cost producer, having more added value, exporting, becoming global, and fighting on their brands and fighting on the value of their products more than simply on low cost. I think this is what will happen.
Okay, thank you.
Sir?
Good morning, Professor. Thank you for
Good
speaking. Jim Chiarello from Pathfinder.
Yes?
We've been aware that inequality has been rising in the United States and
Yeah.
globally. How do you see that? Historically, it's had a negative effect on economies. How do you see the future and where we're going with inequality?
With equality?
Inequality.
Inequality.
Wealth inequality.
Yeah. Well, actually, I know this is a very big debate, but I think it was Schumpeter said one day something I like very much. He said, you always need rich people. And he says the rich class should be a little bit like a luxury hotel, like where we are now. It should be always full of people, but never the same one. It's a very profound statement because it means you need to have a lot of rotation about people becoming rich. They should not be a class in themselves. And if you are looking at the US, the wealthy people of today, these are not the same names as 40 years ago. The Vanderbilt, the Morgan, all those guys have disappeared. The name at the top now are new names. So I think what is important is not so much that you have rich people, it's that you have a turnaround in the amount of people who are accessing to wealth. And this is the most important thing, is that things continue to turn around. It should not be a class in itself. And this in the US, you have done it wonderfully well. I mean, when I look at the people who are getting to the top, it's a formidable engine of growth and innovation. It's fabulous. All those kids at university and elsewhere, they have only one ambition: to become the next Bill Gates, to become the next Larry Page. And this is fantastic. What is bad, and you see it in many countries, is when you have rich people and they become a dynasty and they are blocking everything, and the people underneath cannot have access to wealth. This is a real danger, more than the number of people who are wealthy or not.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Sir,
We
here
have
in
one
the
right
front.
up front here. It's coming behind you.
David Sloan with Valero. You mentioned taxation a little
Yes.
bit, but you didn't mention the debate that's going on here about inversion. You mentioned the emerging market multinational companies that are coming in. Can you speak to how that emerging market and new brands may impact inversion, and what are your thoughts on inversion?
All right, I didn't speak about inversion because I felt it was too a dangerous subject to address here. I think that, number one, the fundamental trend you are going to see, and which is debated today in taxation, is governments now want to tax business where it is made and not where the company is registered. So what they want to say now, and there is a big, big discussion on that, say, you make money in Mexico, we tax you in Mexico for the amount of money you make in Mexico, and we don't care if you are registered in Ireland, in the Netherlands, or elsewhere. That's where you need the taxes. The best way to do it, actually, rock bottom would be VAT. That's a consumption tax. But actually, VAT is a mess to organize, so they don't do it. So the fundamental trend is going to be this one. Tax company on the amount of money they are doing in each country, and not because you have what we call the double sandwich, Ireland. The money goes to Ireland, then it goes to the Netherlands, then it goes to the Cayman Islands, and then it disappears. So this is going to be addressed. That's the first thing. Second thing, inversion. Inversion, you know, the calculation have been that the loss in 10 years for the US government is in excess of $19 billion of tax revenues because of inversion. So they say, we are going to be very careful. You know, a number of companies now try to use inversion to go to Ireland, to go to the Netherlands, to go to Switzerland, no way, not that, but everywhere. And I think we are going to see a very big debate on that. The president here on many occasions has said, I want to stop it. The problem, or the opportunity as you want, is when you want to change the tax legislation, generally it takes ages. And once you have to change it, somebody has found another way to go around it. But I have the feeling that inversion has become too visible today for a lot of companies to use it too much.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. Is there anybody in the audience?
In the back over there.
Okay, thank you.
Hal Kane with Kane and Associates.
Yes?
How do you see stock markets, gold, precious metals, real estate, as far as pricing and so forth going forth in the next couple of years?
Wow. If I knew, sir, I would be permanently living in Orlando. Let me try to answer your question, sir. First, stock exchange, as long as you have an enormous amount of liquidity on the market, some stocks will continue to go up. I will go into stock picking and not into funds. But I think there is so much liquidity on the market, and if the economy is slowing down, we have a lot of big companies says, you know, I have no opportunity for capital investment, therefore I put the money, share buybacks, dividends, and the stock exchange. And that has explained why the stock exchange has been booming despite the economy to be not in very good shape. Stock exchange, yes, but stock picking. The second one is about real estate. This is, in many countries, the real estate market is really much more than volatile. Some countries, if you have good nerves, you can try to invest, but I found it very bad. My advice, there is only one thing which is safe, and it is to buy land which is non-constructed, unconstructed land, anywhere you want in the world, because land where there is nothing on it, they cannot steal it, they cannot have people who start to do things on it. And as Benjamin Franklin said one day in life, always buy land because they don't manufacture much more of it today. And I think this is really the name of the game. There will always be a shortage of land. You can build on the lands, but if you are not quite sure and you want to keep your money somewhere, buy land unconstructed. Sooner or later, it will get value. That would be my advice.
Well, that's fantastic. Stephane, thank you
Thank
very much.
much.
Beautifully done.
Thank you.